Lockheed was tasked by the U.S. Air Force in 1969 to design a plane that could carry 3,000 troops, launch 22 Parasite air-to-air jet fighters, and fly without landing for 41 days. This design would never be realized due to numerous design challenges, from building a powerful nuclear reactor to how to even take off into space. Lockheed designed the upper size limit of the aircraft using conventional materials and technology from 1969.
Jungle.
With America facing enemies around the world of the late 60s was certainly an interesting one, right in the midst of the Cold War. Pentagon officials thought there was a small possibility that the USA would be cut off from its allies and its overseas bases. The leaders of the US had to find a solution that could project an entire US Army brigade abroad, especially to landlocked areas of the world not within reach of any of the US's carrier groups. An aircraft would be the best solution. Air Force officials considered the Boeing 747 that had just taken off for development. But Lockheed was put to work on something even bigger. They wanted to build a city-sized floating aircraft carrier. A number of the most incredible aircraft have come from the Skunk Works at Lockheed Martin, from the high-flying U-2 spy plane to the SR-71, the fastest military jet ever. Yet even those absolute marvels seem insignificant in comparison with Lockheed's plan to build a massive flying aircraft carrier powered by nuclear energy, the CL-1201. An aircraft weighing 5,265 tons was proposed. For the aircraft to get that much weight aloft, the wingspan was 1,120 feet, and the fuselage was 560 feet long. It would have stood as high as a 14-story building, with a height of 153 feet. It's estimated that Lockheed could put this massive bird in the sky using just 4 huge turbofan engines that could run on regular jet fuel up to 16,000 feet, where it would switch to nuclear power via its onboard reactor. Even at a high subsonic cruising speed of Mach 0.8, at around 30,000 feet, the flying aircraft carrier could stay aloft for up to 41 days without refueling. An 845-member crew would be able to operate the aircraft from docking pylons on the wings, which would allow 22 multi-role fighters to deploy. In addition, it would maintain a small internal hangar for repairs and aircraft service while in flight. This design didn't make it past the proposal stage, but it remains a historical anomaly that continues to inspire renewed interest to this day. Because of the aerodynamic research for the previous CL-1170, the CL-1201 would be a greatly expanded version. With a wingspan of 1,120 feet and a length of 560 feet, the fuselage would have an interior volume of 2 million cubic feet. The Chrysler Building in New York is taller than a plane whose wingspan was 45 feet wide. In terms of how much it could carry, Lockheed designed the aircraft to carry around 10 million to 12 million pounds, or 5,440 tons. Lockheed didn't see a need to carry much more than that. A huge plane like this would need nuclear power, and the reactors would give out 1.83 gigawatts, allowing it to fly for 41 days straight at Mach 0.8, over 16,000 feet, and have to land only when the crew ran out of food and water. During an active combat zone, it would be necessary to maintain operations with a crew of 475, which could rise to 800. After over 1,000 operating hours, the reactor itself would need to be refueled. There were 2 versions of this plane. One was the CL-1201-1-1, and the other was the CL-1201-1-3. There was also a mystery CL-1201-1-2, but we do not have any information about it. But stay with me, we'll get to it later. In its first version, the CL-1201-1-1 was called the Attack Aircraft Carrier. Each wing would carry 11 fighter bombers, and the fuselage hangars would hold 2 more, totaling 24 aircraft. Despite not knowing what these final mini-jets were, they're listed in the documents as F-4 Phantoms. This plane would be the spearhead of an invasion or military power projection, and serve as the command center for all military operations. It would also carry 10 long-range attack missiles, with Lockheed not ruling out the possibility that their warheads would be nuclear-tipped. The plane would never land in enemy territory. It would simply circle 600 miles away at 30,000 feet. To go behind enemy lines, the Logistics Support Aircraft, LSA, also known as CL-1201-1-3, was responsible. This version of the plane would carry the bulk of the mission, dropping troops and other equipment. It could carry 400 troops as well as 1,150 tons of cargo. You might wonder how these troops were deployed. That's the job of the similarly ridiculous medium inter-theater transport planes, converted Boeing 707s that would be used to move troops and materials to the LSA. While in flight, the LSA would have 5 707 MITs that could physically dock with it 3 at a time. Upon approach, the planes would connect to the back of the plane, power down the engines, and open a special airlock at the nose. After dropping troops and gear at drop zones, these planes would land at friendly or captured airports or land in friendly countries. There would be 150 troops on each MIT, in addition to the 400 on the LSA, for a total of 1,150 troops in the entire mini-fleet. The aircrafts wouldn't be able to fly on their own. An attack aircraft carrier and 7 logistical support aircraft would make up the fleet group. As the fleet would fly for 41 days straight, each plane had 6 decks for sleeping, recreation, mess halls, strategic command, and more, in addition to the enormous cargo bay that is 22 times bigger than the Antonov 225. Any maneuvers to move equipment around during deployment and flight would have to be coordinated to prevent the center of gravity from shifting too much. It would be able to transport 3,896 troops on the ground, 6,207 tons of equipment, 30 days of food and water, artillery, light aircraft, and attack helicopters. This would be enough to invade almost any country in the world. Despite its impressive power projection, it had several serious flaws that would be detrimental to the United States. We need to start by addressing the elephant in the room. How will these gigantic aircraft take to the air? Due to the wingspan of the aircraft and the 8-foot wide wheels that extend approximately 200 meters along the wing, the runway itself needs to be approximately 650 feet long. A runway of this type does not exist, and several more would be needed for the additional capability of worldwide operations. There's a genius solution that designers came up with when they thought of this. The aircraft wouldn't even take off from a runway. Instead, it would fly vertically, like a Harrier jet. In total, the LSA would have 54 recently developed turbojet engines from the Boeing 747, capable of producing over 82,000 pounds of thrust. To provide vertical lift, the aircraft attack version would require 182 jets. The engines would be arranged in clusters of 20 across the plane. Above 16,000 feet, the 4 massive turbojet engines, each measuring the diameter of a Boeing 747, would power up with their tips flying supersonic. If the engines rotated at 2,000 RPM, the tips would travel at over 4,000 feet per second. This engine technology would have been an impressive feat for the designers back in 1969 and is almost beyond today's technology. The CL-1201 would have a nuclear fission reactor that supplies 1.83 gigawatts to all of the engines, although it has a small fuel supply as a backup and to ensure that the VTOL capability works when needed. Radiation protection would be added to the 30-foot wide core of the reactor to protect the crew during the flight. The reactor was designed so that it would shut down within 20 seconds of impact and could survive a head-on collision with a mountain traveling at 600 miles per hour without breaking apart, which would prevent radioactive material from spilling out. The designers realized that it would be vulnerable to missile attacks. Thus, they developed laser cannons and point defense systems to shoot them out of the sky. Since we don't have many lasers in use today, you can see how that idea would have failed. The CL-1201 project never progressed due to its cost, and what could have been had now been forgotten. A series of UFO sightings referred to as the Phoenix Lights occurred in Arizona, Nevada, in Mexico in March of 1997. The eyewitnesses described the object as a giant flying V that was bigger than a 747 and sounded like the wind rushing. Even though it was nighttime, witnesses saw several lights that looked like those on an aircraft, and the object was so large it obscured the stars in the sky. There are UFO experts who believe that this object would have been about a mile wide and would fit the description of the CL-1201. It was never clarified what the CL-1201 version 2 was intended for. After the event, a Phoenix City councilwoman launched an investigation, noting that of the over 700 witnesses she interviewed, not one was interviewed by the government. Although this sounds cool, the CL-1201 had many problems. In the late 1960s, obviously, the technology was not as good. There was a problem with takeoff and landing, but that was easy to solve. Unfortunately, they couldn't do it because of a lack of power. This would have been an extremely efficient way of conducting war and defense operations, but the technology required just wasn't there. Other, more practical options were used instead.